Hello, my name is Miss Megan, and I am here to announce the April birthdays. We have Christopher in 8th grade, Damien in 2nd, Mariah in 8th, Jonathan in 7th, Zanaya in 2nd, Julian in 1st, Aniana in kindergarten, Violet in 6th, Isabel in 6th, and Jay in 6th. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear students. Happy birthday to you.
Hey guys, good morning. It's Mrs. Kemi, and I just wanted to say congratulations to the 6th and 7th grade middle school students in my homeroom, and give out some awards here. So for all A's honor roll, Lucy, congratulations Lucy, all A's. And for regular honor roll, I have Aurora and Demaya and Bianca. And then my second trimester student of the trimester is Miss Aurora. So, congratulations, you guys.
Thank you so much, and congratulations to everybody who got an award. At this time, it's time for us to do the Pledge of Allegiance. So please stand at attention. If you're wearing a hat or a hood, please take it off with me. And let's go ahead and say the pledge together. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, and I hope that you have an excellent day of online learning. All right, I think we're going. So, welcome back to Da Vinci Tree's online learning. I'm Mr. Will, your teacher for the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, depending on what subjects you're looking at. And today is the week number 7, day number 1. So, if you are following along, creaky chair, if you are following along in real time, and there are about 10 of you who are, and by real time, I mean I post a lesson and then a few hours later you do the lesson rather than waiting a couple days. If you are one of those 10 or more people, then you just celebrated Mother's Day yesterday, so I hope you had a happy Mother's Day. For those of you who don't have moms, maybe your mom's not around anymore, I know there's a couple of you, I hope you had a great Sunday. I know my family and I, we had a really good time. Just kind of spending time together, playing some card games and some video games together. And it was actually a really nice day here in Tucson. So again, I hope you had a good one. I have a new goofy hat that I'm wearing for today. My hair is beginning to grow back and I think it looks weird. So I might be wearing this hat to cover up a little bit. But I really like this hat. I'll show you the other side later during math because it's kind of fun. Well, anyway, without further ado, let's get to the agenda for today. All right, so in life skills, let me first say that today's actual video lesson is pretty light. I'll explain as we go. So for life skills, we're talking about how we view ourselves today before we really dive deep in education, because I want you all to be confident in yourself. A lot of people say, oh, I can't do X, Y, or Z because I'm not meant for success, and that's not true. And so I want to talk about that a little bit and why that's not true, because you all are meant for good things. Next up, we're talking about market equilibriums in economics. It's a big fancy word for something that you probably already have some idea of. We're talking about the Indian Wars in history today and tomorrow. I gotta warn you, it's a very somber topic. It is not happy-go-lucky. It is very serious. So, just be prepared for that. In literature, we just read chapter 16, so we're going to review it. It was kind of fun. It was a chapter that Tom and Joe decided to try smoking, and so don't do drugs, kids. Drugs are bad, including tobacco. Then next in science, I'm not doing any science with you today. I just want you to do the Bernoulli ball extra credit, guys. I haven't gotten any ones in yet, and a bunch of you said that you were doing it, and then I never got the emails. So no science today. You lucked out. Next up in math, the group 1 still has a video lesson, and we are going over compound probabilities, or probabilities with counting outcomes, as Khan Academy calls it. And then in group 2, we are looking at exponent properties. And so group 2, you don't have a lesson with me today. You are just going to watch the review on Khan Academy. It's like 14-15 minutes long, and then do the quiz. All right, let's go ahead and get to it. Our week number 7, day number 1 of Da Vinci Tree Online Learning for the middle school. All right, so today for life skills, we're talking about education and your future, and how education should tie into your future. But I wanted to begin this conversation with a conversation about how we view ourselves. When I was growing up, I had a lot of ideas about what a successful person looked like. I once believed that successful people drove nice cars, they wore ties, they wore suits. I believed that successful people always had expensive watches. I believed that they were usually very intelligent, often very mean and kind of rude. And so that's growing up as a young person, that's kind of what I thought success looked like. As I grew older, that began to change. I remember when I was a student in college and I was interning with a project, and I was one of only a few kids who were from a state school. So there are state schools, and then there's like the Ivy League schools, like the Harvards and the Stanfords and the universities of Pennsylvania and the MITs and Columbia and those kinds of schools. And I used to, in my mind, I thought that these successful students who went to these Ivy League schools were so much smarter than me, and were totally different than the way I lived my life. And when I actually worked with them for several months overseas, I came to understand that there's nothing special about those people. They just work really hard, and that's how they get where they are. And so it's important that whatever you think a successful person looks like, you make sure that that image in your mind of what success looks like includes you. When I was growing up, the image of success for myself didn't include people like me. But as I grew older, I began to unlearn those notions and those ideas that were untrue. People like me who aren't afraid to wear pink t-shirts, people like me who are silly and watch cartoons, people like me who are a little nerdy and make mistakes, they can be successful too. And so I want to begin this conversation by saying people like you are very successful. And I would like you to be one of those very successful people too. And I need you to begin to understand that you are somebody and you can do things in life. You are not a failure. You are going places. And in order to go the places that you want and need to go, you need to be able to put in the work and not be afraid. The students who tried out for university high school this past year, one of the things that I told them, well, most of them, there were a few of you who were not there when you were absent the day when I pulled all of you aside. One of the things that I complimented you on, and as you all know, I love to compliment you, and I like it when you compliment each other, but one of the things I complimented you on was the fact that you were putting yourself out there. Very few students pass the UHS test, less than 10%. I think the past year was 8 or 9% of all the students who took it, only 8 or 9% made it in. That's the same percentage acceptance rate as you find in many prestigious colleges, but this is only a high school. And one of the things that I was trying to drive home for the students who tried was that they learned a lesson at a very young age that success could be for them and that they needed to try. And so I want all of you to understand that as we go into this conversation. An education, again, not necessarily a college education for all of you. For some of you, yes. But an education after high school is for all of you. A successful career that is something that makes you enough money to be comfortable and something that you don't hate, something that you find fulfillment in. Those things are for all of you. And so, again, it is for you. And so for the rest of this conversation, for life skills, I want you to be paying attention, not for me, not for the kids or the people that you think look successful so that you can be like them. But I want you to pay attention so that you can be you and you can be successful at whatever it is that you want to be successful in. I'm a firm believer in leaving all of our options open. And I've learned over the years that, especially with money, which is really a weird thing, some of the richest people in terms of monetary wealth that I've met did not seem to be rich at first. And in fact, some people thought quite the opposite of them. But then I come to find out that they are multi-millionaires, in some cases multi-billionaires, and I'm just hanging out with them, and they're just like normal people, and you know, we and so again, success is something that is for all of us. All right, I'm going to stop the life skills lesson there for today, and we will pick this up tomorrow. Let's go ahead and talk about economics. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, today our new vocabulary phrase for economics is market equilibrium. We talked about equilibrium and what an equilibrium is in week 6, day number 5. An equilibrium is when you have a balance between opposing forces. And so today we're going to talk about how that applies to economics. And so accordingly, we're going to have a quick discussion about this term, or this phrase, market equilibrium. So market equilibrium, also known as economic equilibrium, is the balance between supply and demand that determines the amount sold and the price. If you've been paying attention to previous lessons, you kind of already understand this. I'm just giving you the word for it. And so market equilibrium is, it is, again, the balance between supply and demand that sets the price and the quantity purchased. Now, there are some caveats. Typically, a market equilibrium or an economic equilibrium really is reserved for what we call perfectly competitive markets or mostly competitive markets. I'm not going to get into all the nuts and bolts of that right now, but equilibriums change over time, just like the tides, how we have high tide and low tide, and the average, where the water meets the shore changes. Market equilibriums also change, and so, for instance, if we talk about airline, let's talk about airline flights for passengers. Okay, passenger airline tickets. Okay, so we have passenger airline tickets, and of course, there are the airlines that have the supply. This is our supply curve. There are people like you and me who want to go places, and so that is our demand curve. And then, and so over here we have the cost of the ticket, and down here we have the number of tickets sold. And so the cost per ticket is set right there at the intersection of the supply and the demand. So that little midpoint where the supply and the demand meet, this is the market equilibrium. Oop. Okay, so this right here, my arrow's a little off, that is our market equilibrium. So when we talk about a market equilibrium, again, it's really just that point where the supply and the demand curves touch. Does that make sense? And so this is just the fancy economics way to say that, right? And so, but market equilibriums definitely change. And so what happened with airline tickets had this super careful balance. And so airlines are extremely competitive with each other, like extremely competitive. It's almost like the grocery industry. It's just so competitive, and because they're basically offering the same service. If you, let's say you want to fly to Orlando, maybe you want to go to Disney World, okay? If you check out the fare from Delta Airlines, and if you check out the fare from Southwest Airlines, and the fare from American Airlines, all the different airlines, well, guess what? They're all providing you the same basic service. You get in a giant metal tube called an airplane. It takes you up into the air. A couple hours later, you go down to the ground, hopefully with no accidents, and you're in Orlando. And so all three of those airlines provide that same basic service. Some of them have different features, like maybe they have different movies that you can watch while you're in the plane, but it's the same basic service. And so all three of these are extremely competitive. And so they don't really have that much margin for error. And so what happened when we had the COVID-19 scare recently, again, this is economics and this is current events, is with COVID-19, nobody wanted to fly anymore. Everybody wanted to shelter in place because people are hopefully smart about this and take this seriously. And so when everybody wanted to shelter in place, this demand curve right here, this demand went away. It went backwards this direction. And so the demand curve shifted all the way back here. And so because the demand curve went backwards all of this distance, the new market equilibrium was right here. And so the number of tickets sold dropped dramatically. Now, to be honest with you, right here you see that it kind of dropped by half. In reality, it more like dropped by 80%, maybe even 90%. if you like the transportation, the TSA, the Transportation Security Organization, whatever it's called, association, the TSA, the people who pat you down and who run you through the metal detectors in the airport, they actually count how many people are going through the lines every day. And on a normal day, they have something crazy like 2 to 3 million people going through the lines. And so 2 to 3 million people are checked every day going through American airports on a normal day. And so these days, the numbers have been closer between 1 and 200,000. And so that's a drop of like 80 or 90%. So the number of tickets that are actually being sold during COVID-19 scare, the COVID-19 scare, is really, it's not half of the normal tickets. It's more like a tenth of the normal tickets. And so, as you can see on this graph here, the price, this is the price after COVID-19, okay? Oh, I gotta stop saying okay. This is the COVID-19 price right there. And this is the normal price. Now, if you run an airline, what are you gonna do? If you run an airline, your employees are getting sick, there's way too much, you have way too many tickets and not enough people taking them. And so what the airlines did was the airlines stopped offering service because it was too dangerous and too expensive. And so the demand curve shifted backwards. And then after 2 or 3 weeks, the airlines severely cut back their flights. And so the supply curve also fell backwards like this. And so the demand curve fell, and a few weeks later, the supply curve fell. And so now we have far, far, far fewer flights, and the ticket prices are almost back to normal. In fact, in some cases, they're even more expensive because the planes are just sitting there. They're not going anywhere. It's kind of scary when you see satellite images of all of these planes that are just parked at the airport. They're not doing anything. And it's crazy these days. You can actually look up satellite pictures of cruise ships just out in the middle of the ocean, like 10, 15 cruise ships just kind of laying anchor out in the middle of the ocean, and they're all just kind of like scattered about like little pills floating on the top of a glass of water. And so that's what's happening right now. The demand has fallen for these services, and so the companies, being rational, they cut the supply. And so the market equilibrium goes down, you see? And so the first market equilibrium for COVID-19 right there, it went way, way down. So the normal price is up here. It went down over there. And then when the companies were finally able to catch up and come up with a plan, they cut back the supply, which brought the price back up to normal. And so the price and the amount of tickets sold, that is the market equilibrium. And so the market equilibrium changes with changes in supply and demand for different products. So again, the market equilibrium today may not be the market equilibrium in 2 months. And so again, as an equilibrium, it is a balance between opposing forces, in this case supply and demand, and it changes. I hope that I've done a decent job explaining market equilibrium to all of you, and I hope that this makes a little bit of sense. It's really difficult for me not being there in person with you to answer your questions and make sure you understand. I got something in my eye. Yeah, anyway. But again, I hope this makes sense. We're going to talk about this for a few more days. I'll give you a couple more examples so we can, again, try to understand it and decode it a little bit more. Thanks. So today and tomorrow we're going to spend some time in history reading through the sad history of what is known as the Indian Wars. Now, we discussed the beginning of the Indian War time period in class because the Indian Wars, depending on who you talk to, begin around the 1830s and last all the way up to the Battle of Wounded Knee, maybe even a little before then. And the numbers aren't precise, but historians used to believe, or once believed, that in this country that, or in this continent that we now know as North America, they originally believed that there were between 1 and 2 million Native Americans that lived in North America. But the number has changed with archaeological evidence, and so the numbers now vary for the entire population of Native Americans pre-European settlement, but the numbers for North America in particular range typically between 15 and I've seen some as high as 30 million people. So again, before white settlers came to the continent, Native Americans possibly numbered between 15 and 30 million people who were on this North American continent. At the end of the Indian Wars, the number of Native Americans that the government knew of in the census was around 250,000. So take a moment and think about that. If there were on the lower end maybe 15 million people who were Native American in North America before the settlement, and then after the Indian Wars, we only knew of about 250,000. That is traumatic. The Indian Wars were a period of time where the Native American people had been pushed and pushed and pushed. They had been relocated multiple times. They had their culture trashed over and over again. And so the Native American people but the Native American people knew that in a very big way they needed to come and band together. And so the so-called civilized tribes that we talk about, they worked together. The Sioux Indians worked really hard to defend their land and their rights. But again, as part of the legacy of manifest destiny and the legacy of white settlement, the American government continually beat them down. And so you're going to read about something called the Battle, I'll just call it Custer's Last Stand. So there was a military man named General Custer. He was braggadocious. I don't know if you know what that means. He thought very highly of himself, and he made a very unwise move that ended up in him being killed, and most or all of his party was also killed in a battle called Custer's Last Stand, where he was very much outmatched, and anybody would have known it, and if he was smart, he would not have done what he did. But the Sioux Indian tribe, who claimed the victory in that battle, knew exactly what would happen. They knew that by Custer sacrificing himself, he kind of became a martyr. And so Custer, and Custer's Last Stand in particular, became legendary. And for many years, it was known as like a feat of American heroism. These heroic military guys taking on these savage natives, and so they were celebrated. But in reality, these natives were not terrible savages. They were just trying to defend the land for their people, and they were horrified at the outcome of the battle, even though they won, and so they fled. And as the Sioux Indian fled, the American military came in, and the Khan Academy article doesn't go into too much depth on this, but bands of women and children were picked off by American military regiments to the point where the soldiers in the regiments would not all comply with the commands, because many of these young men didn't want to kill innocents. And we know that today because historians have their journals, and they have gone through and documented the journals of the men in the different military divisions who were tasked with tracking down the Sioux. And this culminated at the Battle of Wounded Knee, where a large group of natives, some of them armed, many of them not, were just completely massacred. And the Battle of Wounded Knee became a flashpoint for American heroism again, just like Custer's last stand. And so for many years, even though it was a terrible massacre and really very much a crime, Americans treated it as a great victory, as something to be celebrated, when in reality it was very much not. And so a lot of mistakes were made during this period of time. It's funny too, like a lot of people looking back at the terrible way that the incoming white settlers and the American government, they look at the way that they treated the Native American people. And sometimes when you hear people talking about the possibility of like alien life or extraterrestrial life, they often use the example of the white settlers and the Native Americans saying, well, you know, if there is alien life and their technology would be so much better than ours for them to get here, you don't want to be like the Native Americans, because then the aliens might treat us like the white settlers treated the natives. and that's like the scary thought, you know. But yeah, so anyway, the term genocide is politically charged when you talk about Native Americans, because a lot of Americans don't understand to what extent the Native people were put down. But in many ways, it's an accurate term. Many tribes, hundreds, maybe even thousands of tribes and languages were lost during this period of time, lost to history, and many tens of thousands of people were killed who didn't need to die. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Please read the article today. Today we're reading the article about the Battle of Little Bighorn, and then tomorrow we are reading the article on Wounded Knee. All right, thanks. I feel bummed out now. Let's talk about literature. Oof. What are we talking about? Yeah, we're talking about 16. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so today for literature, we are talking about chapter 16 in The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. And so in chapter 16, Tom, after sneaking away, he comes back. Remember when I first read this as a kid, I was horrified because I used to love turtles. And so they find some, I think they were turtle eggs, and they're eating the turtle eggs, which really grossed me out. But they're all getting a little homesick, and so they kind of decide that they're going to go back home. But then at the last minute, I think it was Tom, and he was like, no, wait, I have a secret plan. And so he tells them the secret plan, but you as the reader, you don't know what that plan is just yet. And then so they're all like, oh, this is a great idea, let's do it. And then so they decide not to go home right away. And so they kind of hang out together, and then Joe and Tom, they know that Huck is kind of like this cool boy. He's a man of the world kind of thing. And so they ask Huck to teach him how to smoke, and so they can be cool and tough and stuff. And so they're all smoking, and at first Tom and Joe are just like, oh, this is so easy. Why do people make such a big deal out of this? Blah, blah, blah. This is so dumb. And then they both get really sick. And then so later on, they run away saying that they have to look for a knife or something like that. And so Huck like follows up, and he finds both of them asleep in different parts of like the forest. And he guesses that they probably threw up. And so later on, when they get back together, I think for another meal, Huck is smoking, and he asks them, hey, do you guys want to smoke? And they're like, oh, no, we ate something that was bad, so we shouldn't be smoking. And Huck's just like, yeah, sure. And so anyway, that is just kind of cute, the boys trying to be all tough and then not really working out. So anyway, that was chapter 16. So tonight for your homework, read chapter, is that 17? Yeah, read chapter 17 for your homework tonight. Make sure to do your dictionary definitions so we can count those for your literature grade. Make sure to do the 5 times each of those very same words so we can count that for your spelling grade. And that's it. We're good to go. All right, let's real quick talk science. Is it going? Yeah, I think it is. All right, folks, so for science today, we have nothing because I want you guys to do the extra credit. I have not received any of the extra credit yet as of Monday from last week. So please, 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 I'm not going to give you any science homework today. I just want you to do the Bernoulli ball extra credit. Get out that hairdryer, get out a cup, and see if you can use Bernoulli's principles and still make a basket. All right? Like I mentioned last week, we have a ton of Bernoulli balls at the front desk at the office. If you don't have like a plastic ping pong ball, slap on a mask, head into the office, get a Bernoulli ball or two from Mr. Levi or Miss Nikki, and you're done. You know, just take some photos of it, send it in to me. Let me know who you're playing against. If you're playing against your mom or your dad or something like that, or your brother or your sister, I don't know. Yeah, let's get you some extra credit. So please, 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 instead of science class today, let's get that going. I talked to like 6 or 7 of your parents who said that, yeah, they're going to be doing this or they did do this, but I haven't gotten any photos yet, so it's like it didn't happen. All right, so folks, go ahead and do that, and let's start talking about math. Group 1, hope you like my hat. Anyway, today we are taking the probability conversation to the next level, but in many ways, nothing changes. So let me give you an example. So today we are using, some people call it compound probabilities. We're using very specific probabilities. So for instance, let's do the probability that you roll a dice twice, and both times you roll the dice, you get a 1. So it would be like snake eyes, okay? So let's talk about that. Remember, when we're doing a probability, the outcome that we're looking for is on top. Outcome looking for. And then the total number of outcomes are on the bottom. Total number of outcomes. All right. And so if we are rolling a dice twice, the total number of outcomes are a lot. So if you think about it, there are 6 different options every time we roll a die. And if we're only looking for one of those 6 things to happen, we roll the dice once, and we get this. We get 1 over 6. And then we roll the dice again. And so the first time we roll it, we're looking for a 1. The second time we roll it, we're looking for a 1. What are the chances that you'd get a 1 on both rolls? To figure that out, we actually just multiply. So out of all of the possible combinations, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then for 1, this is the first roll. This is the second roll. Now remember, for 1, you can get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. For that, and then it goes all over again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And so there's a lot of possibilities out there to roll. I'm probably doing a really bad job explaining this, but to get down to the nuts and bolts of it, we just multiply straight across. And so there's only one outcome that we're looking for in this instance. We're looking for one outcome, and that outcome is 2 1s. And so there's only one eventuality in which you roll 2 1s. But there are actually 36 eventualities, or 36 total outcomes in all. And we figured that out by taking 6 times 6. And so the chance that you would roll a die twice or a dice twice and in both times get a 1 is 1 out of 36. All right? What if we take that up a notch? What if we say, what are the chances that I would roll a die or dice 3 times? Every time I roll the dice, it's a fair dice, it's not weighted. Every time I roll that dice, I get a 1. Or any number. Let's say every time I roll the dice, I get a 2. All right? Well, so 2, there's only 1 2 on the dice. And so there's only 1 outcome on the dice out of 6 total outcomes every time you roll it. And I'm going to roll it my first time, my second time, and my third time. And the question is, what are the odds, or what is the probability that I would roll it 3 times and get that 2 every single time? Again, it's just simple multiplication. So there's only one eventuality. Whoops, why is my iPad acting like this? There's only one eventuality in which this happens, where you get a 2 for all 3 rolls. So this only happens once. And then if we want to know about every possible outcome, again, we multiply. 6 times 6, it gives us 36. And so that it becomes 36 times 6. And if we do the math on this real quick here. Did I get that right? Yeah, 18 plus 30 is 21. Yep, okay. So we get 1 out of 216. So you have a 1 in 216 chance of rolling a fair dice 3 times and getting the same number each time. It's not impossible, and it's just a little improbable. All right, so again, the outcome that we're looking for is on the top. The total number of outcomes are on the bottom. In today's Khan Academy lesson, the outcomes that we're looking for are typically more than 1. In the examples I just gave, I was only looking for 1 specific outcome, but in the Khan Academy lesson, there are often more than 1. So go ahead and watch that Khan Academy lesson. You don't have to do any actual work today other than just watching it. It's a completion grade. All right, ladies and gentlemen, have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Maybe I'll have another silly hat too. I don't know. Okay, group number 2. So last week we went over a lot of the properties that you need for exponents, and this week basically you're going to be quizzed on them. So today you have a 14 or 15 minute long review video to watch for Khan Academy, and then you have to do the quiz. So there's 2 links there. It's very straightforward, and so yeah, I'm not going to teach another lesson today because given everything that we did last week, this week or today's portion should be pretty straightforward. Okay, well, go ahead and get that done, and I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day. If you are trying to budget your time, I would probably budget maybe 30 to 40 minutes for today's math, but it might take you far less than that. So, all right. Anyway, we'll see you tomorrow. Take care, guys and gals and toasters.